Here.
Jeff Gard is absent. Melina Meyer is absent. Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
and David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay, the work session topic is the City of Cordova's fiscal year 22 budget discussion. Would you like to open, Helen?
Sure. First of all, I put in this packet for information the UBS spending calculation for our endowment. I know everyone is very concerned about our portfolio and our endowment and our earnings, and I realize that while UBS and I have been having conversations around formalizing a process by which we would tap the earnings of the permanent fund for both safeguarding corpus as well as providing some level of support on an annual basis for city operations. So I asked Chad to put together an information packet for your digestion. But what I really wanted to show is that the $300,000 that I had put in the budget for a draw from the permanent fund earnings was based on a calculus that UBS and many other entities that have endowments use to calculate a reasonable formula that will protect the basis, the corpus of the fund, the permanent fund, but also allow for earnings to be used to help balance budget. So the number he came up with was 309. I put in 300. And I just wanted all of you to understand some of the conversations that we can have early next year around a plan for spending, reasonably spending investment earnings off of the endowment. So moving on from that, I can't answer any questions, but I think there's just a lot of information here, and Chad would certainly be more than willing to come and talk to us in January, where we will have a concerted focus on establishing our revenues, establishing how we have our investments done. I know that's been a concern of many of you, and I just want you to know that we are working on it, and we will have some suggestions and ideas in early January. So on to the budget. At the last meeting, work session, there were some suggestions made, which I've attempted to incorporate, but I want to bring a couple things to your attention. At the last budget, I balanced it based on a $300,000 draw from the permanent fund. And you guys let me know in uncertain terms that that was not something you were comfortable with, and you asked me to make some cuts. You suggested a cut to CCMC from $500,000 down to $300,000, which I did. And that left me with trying to fill a $100,000 problem with some cuts. Then I plugged in new numbers based on how negotiations with the IBEW are going. It is by no means the end of the conversation, but I think it represents something fairly close to where we likely will end up in terms of budgetary impacts. We are still negotiating. And then the second thing is that our health fund, which has been running up a positive number this year, current year, looks to be running a negative number. We are self-funded, so if claims are above what we are pulling in for our premiums, city is responsible for making up that difference. In the past, we've had a little carry forward. That carry forward from prior years will be used to plug the hole in the current year health fund deficit. And we do not anticipate there will be any forward funding for FY22. So I removed another $128,000, $798 from the budget. So I had a $200,000 problem again, 200 and change. With that, instead of removing all $300,000 from the permanent fund earnings, I did leave $100,000 in there and then made adjustments to the budget in various places to, again, balance it. So there was at least $100,000 plus in cuts, an increase in salaries and wages reflective of the current IBEW negotiations, and then an acknowledgement that we will have no carry forward on the health fund. So with that, this budget is presented with a zero net, and I will answer any questions.
Council, questions? Councilman Gleason?
So we had 11.
Mike,
Sorry.
please.
We had 11 employees that we were going to. Does this include all those employees
In terms of
hiring?
hiring positions, vacant positions, yes. I think we added 1, 2, 3 employees. Parks and Rec, we removed one of the employees that was slated to be added. We did include all the new fire department EMS position. We have one in the current existing budget. We added another for next year's budget, and we added 2 part-time people to cover summer shifts that to accommodate the fact that our volunteer pool is somewhat limited during the summer. Let's see what else. Reduction in Parks and Rec. I don't have the total net gain loss, but it is fewer positions than was originally presented.
But we're still going to plan on hiring HR, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then this does include that $500,000.
ARPA,
Yep.
572.
To me, we're still 500,000 because we're only going to get that money for 2 years, and then we're going to be having to generate, if we're going to keep the budget the same way it is, we're going to have to generate $500,000 of revenue to keep it the same.
Right, and I think my rationale at this point is this, is that it's very clear to me that city services are impacted by the lack of full staff. I have now 2 years to figure out how to make it work. Or we enjoy 2 years of increased staffing, and then we have to make adjustments to the budget. Adjustments happen all the time. I'm not fearful of increasing the budget size or adding personnel, because in my mind, city clearly needs to do these things in order to meet the objectives that the community has articulated, both in the comp plan and in the kind of general conversations that we all have. We have an opportunity to look for additional funding, and I think those funds will be available. And it's my job to make sure that we seek those out. So while I appreciate that where we are right now, looking forward is like there's a cliff where $572,000 won't be available to us. I view that as an opportunity for me to build a bridge and make that cliff manageable, navigable. Is that a word? Yes. I also want to let you know that I did reduce the CCMC budget to $300,000. There's other cuts, but in order to make a $200,000 cut, you can't nickel and dime it. You have to look for large numbers. So I will admit that that's what I did, and that's where we're at.
Councilman Sherman, then I'll check online, and then back to Councilman Gleason.
So Helen, thank you for that. I just wanted to double check too, the public works operator is still in the budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a shared position, isn't it? A water sewer shared. Sorry.
Okay.
Too many numbers. Yeah. So we have water sewer position added and a public works position added. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The snow really hit home, and
Oh, yeah.
that made me think about that.
Yeah.
So in my calculations too, the $572,000 is hanging out there. The $100,000 from the permanent fund, and then I also throw in the library museum grants, because basically those are ARPA funds too. I know the library is pretty much guaranteed a $7,000 grant every year, so that takes it to $93,000. But that's another chunk of change that isn't going to be that big every year.
And I think acknowledging that is that we have an opportunity to do some really good work over 2 years with those ARPA funds. Then they disappear.
Yep.
Maybe we've plugged the hole with other resources. Maybe we don't get to do that good work anymore, but at least for 2 years, we can enjoy that. And again, the ARPA funds are really, for instance, the library museum, they have very specific things they have to do with that. So they have added staff with 100,000-ish in grant funding. They've been able to add staff and increase their services. If they don't do that work, those ARPA funds are not available to them. They have to turn them back in. So we have some instances where we are adding staff, committing to projects and programs based on grant funds that will disappear. And we either figure out a way to pay for them into the future, or we say, we get this for 2 years, let's enjoy it while we can. And that's where we're going to be with the library museum positions that are added. And maybe with others as well. Hopefully not.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any councilmen online? Councilman Baylor or Allison, and then Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, this is Councilman Baylor.
Councilman Baylor.
Frustrated, really. Frustrated by the city manager's answers there on where we're going to get the money. There's some magic spot that we're going to find. Frustrated with UPS. You know, I read through their whole thing. You get down to page 6, and so one of the last paragraphs there, finally, endowment model could be combined with pure percentage model. Then you go on to talk about we could get more in equities to make more money. Well, duh. But why in the hell don't they get to us 10 years ago and say this? Why didn't they tell us that 5 years ago? You know, this is what I'm so frustrated with this company is they don't do anything until we go to them kicking and screaming. And now here we are, we shortfall, and we're going to pull money out of the permanent fund, and we'll talk to them in January. Well, we need to make those decisions today. I really would suggest that the next council goes out and gets the RFP, because this is ridiculous the way they're handling that.
Okay, Councilman Baylor, we're kind of wandering away from the budget, and that's a separate topic, that financial management.
Oh, no, it's not a separate topic, because we're pulling money out of the permanent fund, and we have to, I brought this up at the last meeting, we need to understand how much money we can pull out of that fund without doing damage. And the opinion of this gentleman is here. So that's what I'm referring to. It's in the agenda. So the other thing is the CCMC. Well, I understand we pulled $200,000 from them, but you know how this goes. If they actually need it, they're going to be coming back to us later. So you're going to have to know that $200,000 at some point. So that's, you know, kind of road. I'm just not comfortable voting for this until we have a discussion on how we're going to pay for it. And I know we've got the, I'll call it COVID money. I know we have those funds, but those are going to dry up. And to say that we'll go 2 years and then we'll look at it then and maybe we'll have to cut staff or we'll find some money. No, we need to start discussing and let the community know now what we're going to do, what taxes are we going to raise, how are you going to be impacted. If you want these programs, this is what it's going to cost you. And I don't think we're being fair to the community by, you know, kicking this can down the road and we'll deal with it 2 years from now. And, you know, I know how you'll deal with it. It's kind of like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren model. You'll just go after the people that have the dollars. So you'll go tax, you'll raise property taxes, and the more value you have in the house, the more you'll pay. You know, it's not an equal representation. And we've talked about other ways, you know, cutting, making the loopholes in the tax cap and stuff. That should be part of our process. We should be talking about how we're going to pay for this. So that's my frustration. We can pay for it this year, but what are you going to do down the line? So that's all I got to say.
Okay, Councilman Schaefer.
you did a good job listening to our comments at the last meeting and putting this together. And I guess my one question was, now that the Cordova Center stuff is pulled out, so
It's actually in the budget. I pulled it out as a separate document for reference only. So those numbers are still embedded in the budget because there's a lot that needs to be migrated into that, including personnel like our janitorial staff, some positions that are embedded in the library museum budget as temporary employees. And those didn't all get pulled out. But I wanted you to see as a separate document exactly what Cordova Center looks like. I did get from Kathy percentages of space so that we would only allocate to the Cordova Center those expenses that are directly related to rental of the facility and use by third parties. And so City Hall is out of it, library's out of it, museum's out of it. And we'll try to make a cost center that makes some sense so that you know what the potential revenues from rental of this space would be and the expenses associated with the rental of that space. So I'm a ways away from that yet, but I just put it in there as a just starting place for reference.
okay, yeah, because looking at the, oh my God, I'm really loud, on page, I think it's 23, where it does have the Cordova Center events pulled out, the expenditures for FY22 are significantly lower than those in fiscal year 21, but is that just because it's the percentage?
Yes.
Like it's, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
we weren't being super unrealistic.
Actually, the two columns represented there are not two different years. It's the actual year, FY22 numbers pulled out, and then the percentages associated. So, and I didn't label those at all, and I apologize for that because that was very unclear.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That makes more sense now.
Yeah, and again, this sheet is not to be viewed, it should be viewed just as a separate informational piece. Those numbers are all integrated into the current presented budget.
So this isn't another like $100,000
No,
gap?
no,
Okay.
no. My
That was
apologies.
my concern.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Councilman Allison?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Alex.
Yes, Councilman Allison.
I can sympathize with most of what Councilmember Baylor is having to say. I made some of those same comments at the last meeting that we still got a big hole, and I mentioned my concerns. The last meeting was that we're always talking about we need to find revenues to do this, and we're never talking about expenses. But I hear the manager saying that we'll do what we got to do in a couple of years, and I tend to guess that we've got a few more than just a couple of years to go with this additional money. So I think I'm okay with the budget, but I do want to have those discussions that Councilmember Baylor is talking about. One question I did have was, where does this leave? Does this leave the schools at the maximum?
It's slightly under the maximum. Let me just pull this up just a second here.
Like a reduction of 45.
I did reduce the school because those were big numbers. So last year we gave them 1.645, and next year I'm proposing giving them 1.8 in cash. I think originally I'd put 1.85, so I did put a little cut in there. So with the in-kind, they still are increasing over $100,000, $140-something thousand over last year's budget.
Yeah, we're pretty close to the cap.
Yeah, we're pretty close to the cap. I think the cap is 2.02, and that includes the in-kind.
I want to look at their budget. we don't officially release their budget till May after that second half of
Right.
our fiscal year, the first half of their fiscal year. So I think I'm okay with this budget, but I do have the same concerns Councilmember Baylor has.
Yep.
We need to have the discussions now, not in 2 years. At least closing these loopholes that we've got, like for the the sales tax cap exemption. Take advantage of some of those costs that or revenues that we're missing out on that are currently part on the books. So,
Right.
But all in all, I think it's a pretty good job. I'm still not comfortable with a $12 million budget. I think we're too high on that. But like Tom says, we need to have discussions and see what the community is willing to pay for. And if they're willing to pay for it, then so be it. If they're not willing to pay for it, then they'll tell us what we got to cut. So.
And I want to let everyone know that there are members of city staff here if anyone has questions about any specific departmental budgets. And then Dr. Sanders is here in person to discuss the CCMC budget if anyone had any questions.
Thanks for that reminder, Helen. Councilman Sherman.
So I'm going to just wrap up my thoughts too, because all my questions have been answered. And thank you very much, because I know we handed you a heavy task last time, Helen. I am comfortable with passing this budget as it is, but on the caveat that on pending agenda or in January of 2022 is when I'd like to start. We begin some long-term financial plans and discuss tax caps, potential gas tax. We're going to have to think about mill rate. I read in my hometown paper, their mill rate is 21.5. And it's not much bigger town than this. So I'm comfortable. I'm really actually happy that we have these positions that have been vacant for so long that are being filled. That's something that has to be done, and the community wants these services, so the community is going to have to get involved and get engaged and tell us how we're going to pay for it. And so I'm good.
So, Council, we have Public Works, EMS, Harbor staff here. Dr. Sanders, any questions for Dr. Sanders regarding CCMC or any of the other budget items?
I have a conversation, or is this not the right place for it?
Through Helen.
So, you guys are talking about budgets. We haven't even talked about capital projects yet.
Right, and that's going to be done separately.
Tomorrow, or?
No, we're not going to present a capital budget until we get the ARPA funds that are going to be assigned. So that is another piece, just to clarify for the community. We are not presenting a capital budget.
I've
And
got some pretty big ticket items that need to be discussed, so I'm just throwing it out there. If we're gonna give the school a bunch of money and the hospital a bunch of money, we're gonna be declothed, I guess, so just bring that up.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Council? Okay, so I guess I'll take silence as an assent that this is the budget that you want brought back to you for approval. Helen.
I want to just say one more thing. The fee schedules, I didn't include in this, they will be presented to you. I will send you an email with the fee schedules attached, but they reflect the 5% increase that you guys had asked be included over a 5-year period. This is the last of the 5-year period. So there's 5% increases reflected in the fee schedules. And then the Parks and Recs Commission met and adjusted their fees for Bedarkey and various services that Parks and Recs provides, rentals of spaces and things like that. So that fee schedule will be included in this budget is based on those numbers.
Councilman Sherman.
And Helen, I believe too that we'll have the Cordova Center fee schedule ready to be included in the packet.
Okay, like, I guess it's,
Tomorrow at noon.
okay, perfect, okay. I'm integrating the fee schedule now, so yes, thank you. I think everyone's acknowledging that there needs to be additional revenue generated, and we have done that. Just to let you know that the fee schedule numbers, I believe, are fully integrated into this budget.
Anything else, council?
Yes, Council Baylor, I have a comment. It's not on the budget, but before you close the meeting, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead. I think we're done with budget.
Okay, well, this is in regard to PISWAC, some sad news. Tim Moore, who was a really big part of PISWAC, he served as the president of the board for a long time. He passed away on December 2nd, so he'll be totally missed. I meant to send this on to the mayor, so perhaps we could get a whole card out to the family or something. I think they speak to how important he was to the PISWAC, but kind of a sad day. He passed away on December 2nd.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Baylor. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned.
I didn't know that about Tim. It was awesome.